So this video, we're going to talk about oligopolies, and primarily with oligopoly, we focus on game theory because that's how we can model when very few decision makers are kind of making decisions about pricing strategies and all sorts of other business strategies. It's how we can model their decision making. So we use game theory for that purpose, although as you all know, game theory is a much broader kind of application field than just in oligopolies. So that being said, interdependence is a quality of oligopolies where the outcome for one company, or we could just say agent or an actor, depends on the decisions of another actor, agent, person who's involved in some form. So this is the nature of oligopolies, is that they are interdependent. That's a critical requirement. A cartel is a formal agreement to collude. Not all oligopolies formally collude, but they often informally collude through things like price leadership and that sort of thing. And they often use game theory strategies that end up being an informally collusive of type of situation. But in general, cartels are the formal agreements. Nash equilibrium in game theory is a situation in which neither player will deviate from their choice, and we sometimes call those choices strategies, from their strategy, as long as the other player continues with their own strategy or choice. So it's kind of where the players will end up, which is why we call it an equilibrium. Not all games have a Nash, is a way to think about it. We'll look at it in a second. And a dominant strategy is a strategy that is always chosen by the player, regardless of the other player's decision. And again, you don't necessarily have to have one. And so we'll kind of look at some examples here. So the first one says payoffs indicate profit. American Airlines, United Airlines, two airline companies here. And we're going to just solve this one first and then answer some questions. So I've pulled out the pen here. And the way to read these is to say, play as maybe United first, and assume that American goes to increase bag fees. Well, if United is going to increase its bag fees, it will get 200. They get the number on the left because they're the left player. And if United maintains, then United gets 180. So if United thinks American Airlines is going to increase its bag fees, then we know that United will also increase its bag fees. And so that's the choice that they will make here. Now, if they think that American is going to maintain, they could either get 160 or 170. So this is a situation where they would prefer 170. And so they do not have a dominant strategy. And that's actually this question here. None. And that's because in some cases they will increase their bag fees, in other cases they'll maintain. Now let's take a look at it from the perspective of American Airlines. Now American Airlines thinks maybe they play and they say maybe United will increase its bag fees. Okay, so in that case, American can get 240 or 190. So what will they do? Well, they will go for the 240 and increase their bag fees. Now, what if, on the other hand, American thinks United is going to maintain? Well, they could get 170 or 180. So they will go for the 180 and they will maintain, right? So they'll maintain or they'll increase. Now, that means, and we'll say, American has none, right? So neither one has a dominant strategy, but we actually have two Nash equilibria. This is a Nash and this is a Nash. And that's because... Right, so I'm just going to draw these here. That's because if they ended up in either one of those spots, neither player will switch to the other strategy so long as the first player continues to do what they were doing. Now, the last question here says, if American increases bag fees, what will United earn if it plays rationally? So reading the table, we say, okay, American's going to increase, and so American gets 240. That means United will get 200. Okay, now let's take a look at the problem below it. And in this one, it says payoffs indicate years in prison. So we've got El Chapo and Al Capone, two notorious criminals, and we'll kind of solve for them. Now, if Al Capone, and I'm going to switch the order here, if Al Capone thinks that El Chapo is going to confess, so now that means Al Capone can get 15 years or 20 years. What should Al Capone do? If he thinks El Chapo is going to confess, he should confess and get 15. Now, if he thinks El Chapo is going to remain silent, he could get 1 year if he confesses, or he could get 3 years if he remains silent, because maybe they've got them both on some small charges. And in this case, Al Capone will confess. So we can see that no matter what El Chapo does, Al Capone will confess. And so, in fact, that means Capone has a dominant strategy to confess. Confess. And let's switch and see what happens to El Chapo. If he thinks that Al Capone is going to confess, which he knows he will because he's assuming he's going to play rationally, El Chapo could confess and get 15 years or stay silent and get 20. Well, he's going to confess as well. He's going to say, you know what? Capone was part of it. And so they could end up there. Now, if, on the other hand, he thinks that Capone is an idiot and is going to remain silent, then he could either confess and get 1 year or remain silent and get 3. Well, he's going to confess. So we would also say, and so does El Chapo, right? They have the same dominant strategy, which means now we only have one Nash equilibrium, and that's the confess box. And that's actually, as we see here, it's actually the worst box for them to end up in, right? If we sum the years in prison here, we can find that this is really bad, 30 years there, and it's the worst outcome, but yet they will end up there. They will end up there. Oops, I didn't mean to do that, but hopefully we've got that here. So we know that this one's confess. I managed to erase it. Boy, that's embarrassing. And this is confess always now. And if El Chapo confesses, we also know that Capone will always confess. So now on the AP test, one thing that they've been throwing at us lately is they'll say, okay, now you've done all this part. What happens if we change the numbers? And they'll say something like, for American and United, the government has decreed that if you maintain bag fees, you get more money. So it is important that you be able to say, come in here and say, well, if they maintain, like if you maintain, we'll say you get plus 15. And then reanalyze is usually what the AP tests are doing. And I wouldn't be surprised if even here in 2020, you get one that looks like this. So if you maintain, you get 15. So it's not going to change that one. It won't change that one because those are both dependent on them increasing. Now in the bottom one here, they both maintain. So this becomes 185 and this becomes 195. And it's a little bit trickier with these, but you just have to know that the maintain is this maintain. This applies to the one on the right. So this one is now 205. And then the 160 stays the same because that's from United increasing its bag fees. Now in this one, the 170 is going to stay the same because that's from American increasing, but the 180 will go up to 195. And then it's just a matter of resolving the problem. So that has been a kind of question that we've seen lately. A good thing to be able to kind of know how to change those and reanalyze it. Hopefully this helps you. See you next time.